It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. When he came to Rice, he was my department chair. A decade later, I was his department chair. We then worked together very closely for 5 or 6 years in the context of the Kennedy Institute and the data science search. I feel as if Moshe knows me like no other faculty member at Rice. He's demonstrated that on several occasions. He's a true asset to the department, and he is the Karen Ostrom, there we go, Karen Ostrom Professor in Computational Engineering.
Thank you. So Chris gave a fantastic talk earlier and started bringing up ethical issues in computing, and I would like to follow up on that. But I want to go to something which I think is a bit more, even more fundamental, and we don't talk about it enough, and this is trust. How many people play the fall game? This is very often corporate, it's a ritual, corporate offsite thing, building trust. You have to stand on a ledge, and you have to fall backwards, and your colleagues are supposed to catch you, so you hope, right? It's a bit kind of terrifying. And the idea is that you have to take risk, and you have to trust that other people will be there for you. It turns out that trust, if you think there are many other situations where trust is important to how we function as a society. Think what happens when you go to a traffic light. You have green light. You trust, first of all, that the traffic light works, and that means that the other direction will have red light. And you trust that other people will obey red lights. And we just take it for granted. But you have to go to some, maybe there are some third world countries where this trust is not so robust, and a red light is a friendly suggestion. And then you don't just drive full speed through a green light because you don't know what's going to happen. Think how democracy works. We have a set of rules. You have to trust that people are following the rule. If you lose this trust, the system crumbles. Trust is incredibly important to how economic function work, okay? The banks loan you money, and they have to trust that the money will be paid back. Of course, they have all kind of other way to ensure the trust. But, there are some industries, I think the diamond industry, people just shake hands. That's how you sign a contract, you shake hands. It's based on trust. In an article last year, about a year ago, in the Financial Times, there's research that quantified the importance of this trust. And it compared high trust countries, such as Sweden, to low trust countries, such as, for example, Russia. And he said that it's a huge impact of if Russia could suddenly start, if people could trust each other in the system, this could grow the economy by about 60%. Satya Nadella said earlier this year, we cannot afford not to build more trust in technology because our entire economic growth agenda can come to a standstill without it. We don't talk enough about trust. And we need to talk about it because we have a problem. To trust technology, you either have to be familiar with the technology, or very often for people, technology is a black box, but you trust the people who develop this technology. Or you trust the company because you don't know the people individually. Or you don't even know which company exactly does it, but you trust the industry. What's happening if it's none of the above? I have bad news for us. For us, it's approaching none of the above. Do people trust the technology? Think of security. Every day you hear about another breach. We now know for sure that the combination of technical and socio-engineering, American democracy has been hacked. I consider the situation with security, the situation insecurity, a failure of our profession. I mean, we should all stand in shame because of what we have done. Privacy. Surveillance is not a bug anymore, it's a feature. You have huge industry based on surveilling our personal data. I'll talk a little more about it on automated decision making, but there is a phrase, explainable AI, We need to understand this is a term of aspiration. We don't have explainable AI. It's a beautiful research area. People write proposals. We don't have explainable AI at this point. That vendors, this is the industry. This is us. I consider myself part of this ecosystem. How many people use Gmail? Raise your hand if you use Gmail. How many people read the terms of service? This is pretty good. This is pretty good. This is usually you find one lone vote say, yeah, I read it. Okay? Actually, when you read it, it's pretty scary what you find out. Every time you send a document on Gmail, you give Google a license. Surveillance, as I say, it's a business model. I'll come back to that in a minute. And, I mean, I don't want to use the H word, but do what I say, not what I do. We read about tech executive limit the use of technology by their own children. These smart devices are for your children, not for their children. Here is a new title, just I saw this morning in the Washington Post. Silicon Valley pioneers self-driving cars. But some of these tech-savvy residents don't want them tested in their own neighborhoods. Your neighborhoods are okay, not our neighborhoods. Mark Benioff, who is one of the more, I would say, socially conscious, societally conscious CEOs in Silicon Valley, said last year, there is a crisis of trust concerning data privacy and cybersecurity. I think it is broader than that. I mean, it's clearly about privacy and security, but I think it's broader than that. And there is now a new word, the tech clash. If you live in Silicon Valley, I'm sure you have heard about the tech clash. I became aware of it in October 2017. I read a column by Peggy Noonan in the Wall Street Journal, and this was about the gun culture. And her argument to me is actually nonsensical, but it doesn't matter. She tried to explain why do people buy guns, and here is her answer. Because all of their personal and financial information got hacked in the latest breach, because our country's real overlords are in Silicon Valley and appear to be moral Martians. She always had a way for alliteration, with alliteration, moral Martians, who operate on some weird new postmodern ethical wavelengths, and they will be the one programming the robot that will soon take all the jobs. Okay? So that tells you how Silicon Valley went. If you ask people 3 years ago about Silicon Valley, they said, great gadget, great devices, good jobs, wealth, and suddenly people look at Silicon Valley as, there is a new phrase. We used to have big tobacco, big pharma, and now it's big tech. So I want to go into automated decision system as one example. So 2.5 years ago, John G. Roberts, the Chief Justice of the United States, visited RPI and had a fireside chat with the President, Shirley Ann Jackson. And she asked him, can you foresee a day when smart machine driven with AI, artificial intelligence says, plural, will assist with courtroom fact-finding or even more controversial even the judicial decision-making? And he said, it's a day that's here, and it's putting significant strain on how the judiciary goes about doing things. This is not science fiction, this is reality. And you can go and you look, there are many applications. So the justice system has to make many decisions that are profound and are very difficult for people to do. So how do we get out of having to make such big decisions? Let machines make this decision. And there is a promise of big data, and we'll make all these wonderful decisions. Bail, sentences, parole, separating children from parents, and so on and so forth. And you can find, there is a corporation, North Point, and they have a beautiful website about advancing justice and embracing community. What's wrong with that? Right? It sounds fuzzy, warm and fuzzy. But people start digging a bit deeper into that, and I think one of the things that came out, and ProPublica came up in May 2016, and they kind of reporting that what Chris told us, that you take the same background, you just change the names to the person sound black instead of white, and suddenly the system makes different recommendations. And you can understand why that. It's based on data, and we have a history in this country of injustice towards the African American community. So you learn from the data, garbage in, garbage out. That's how you make decisions. And even beyond that, people actually have done a more scientific study that appeared last year in Science Advances, and they look at the system Compass that claimed to study from 137 features. And at the end of the day, first of all, the recommendation, every person just with a little bit common sense would make the same recommendation. And it turned out that really probably underneath they're just using linear regression on 2 features, okay? And there is no auditing requirement, there's no fairness assurance. I love this phrase, there's no fairness assurance for this system. It's completely unregulated. And just to make it extreme, I want to tell you about my dog. He's a black lab, Fluffy, and I trained Fluffy to detect risk of recidivism. Fluffy sniffs you, and Fluffy knows whether or not you are going to go back to the way of crime. And I took Fluffy to the justice system, and they brought people, and Fluffy just has uncanny sense of smell. But as you can see, Fluffy is a black box, literally. So how would you feel if I go now to the court here in downtown Houston, and we will use Fluffy to make parole decisions? Of course, everybody understands that this is extreme. I bring it to make it ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Nobody will let Fluffy make parole decision. But a black box software that has been trained on lots of data is in some sense no better than Fluffy. And for the Chief Justice of the United States, who is in charge of all federal courts, because the Supreme Court is also a regulatory agency for the federal justice system, to sit there and says, oh, this day is upon us and we're having difficulties, instead of getting his act together and to say, let's study, let's have some regulation in place, to me, it's a scandal. How many people here, this is a nerdy crowd, how many people read Ender's Game? Almost everyone, yeah. So for those few who didn't read it, I'm going to spoil it. Ender thinks that he and his friends are playing video games. Unbeknownst to him, he's fighting an intergalactic war. When he wins the game, he wins the war, he destroys a planet. Guys, that's us. We thought we were playing games, we're now running the world. And it's not a pretty picture what we have done with it. Now, how people react to this? The reaction to this is we have an ethics crisis. So you can see New York Times, Boston Globe, New York Times, you know, amazingly, the final title, I mean, I was in stitches. Facebook is so concerned about ethics that they are funding research in the Institute of Ethics in Munich, $7.5 million to study ethics. Yeah. So this is what you see from the media throughout 2018, ethics, ethics, ethics. And it's not just the media. There is something called the Computing Research Association. Academic will be familiar with the Computing Research Association. It's an association of all computer science research-oriented computer science department and research lab in computing. And it's a really very, very good organization. And they hold every other year, they have a biennial meeting in Snowbird, Utah. It's called just, in the community, we just call it, have you been to Snowbird this year? It's about the conference. And there was a panel on the social responsibility. And the question posed to the panel, where we live in a world that we computing professionals have created. We can no longer pretend that we are making the world a better place by using hash functions. And the question was, what is our social responsibility as computing professionals? And distinguished panelists, one after the other, came up and say, ethics, ethics, ethics. And I want to be the ethics skeptic. Not that ethics is not important, ethics is incredibly important, I'll come back to it, but let me explain why to me ethics is not the answer here. And for this, I'll go to another revolutionary technology. It was revolutionary about 100 years ago. When the Ford Model T rolled off the production line, it changed the world in a way that probably more profound than the way we have changed the world so far. If you look, what is the most significant technology of the 20th century? I would say the automobile. Just look at how Houston looks like. The automobile has shaped all the cities that grew in the 20th century. And of course, fairly soon after the Ford Model T started driving around, we discover automobiles kill people. Well, maybe people kill people, but they use automobile as means to an end. And the question is, can we do something about it? And the answer is yes. Now, it's complicated how to measure our success because there are more people, there are more cars. So the way professionals in this area judge it is death per billion VMT. VMT is vehicles mile traveled. How many people die for each billion of vehicle mile traveled? And this is this line here. This is this reddish line. And as you can see, it's been going down for 100 years. If you zoom in a little bit, you see that it has gone up in the last few years. Anybody knows why it's been going up? Texting. Texting while driving, okay? So we have been able to reduce mortality significantly. How did we do it? All kind of things that you think about: mirrors, anti-lock brakes, airbags, crosswalk, traffic lights, laws. A myriad different ways to reduce mortality from car crashes. How did we not do it? We didn't say every driver needs to get ethics training. That's not what we did. What did we do? Public policy. Public policy means some of this came from the car manufacturer. Some of this, some of you may remember the huge fight over airbags. All the car industry, the car manufacturer said, no, it's too expensive. But they were forced to do it. Safety, seat belts. Seat belts are controlled by state laws. So the federal government had to induce the states to put laws for seat belts and so on and so forth. Laws. I call all this framework, I call it public policy. It was not ethics, it was public policy. So let's look at a huge part of our life from this angle of ethics versus public policy. The internet. So if you want to know what the internet goes back to culturally, you have to go to the California Bay Area in the mid-80s. There was something called the Whale, which was a network of dial-up bulletin board. It was lots of kind of the culture of networks, and a lot of discussion goes back to the Whale. And a few years later was Usenet. The people who are old enough remember Usenet and Unix to Unix network. And the culture that they come up was the culture of the 60s. When you say the 60s, you really need to think of the 70s. The 60s really happened in the 70s. And the culture partly had to do, for example, because of Vietnam War, it was very, very anti-establishment. And out of that came the mantra, information wants to be free. Of course, information doesn't want anything, right? Bits are bits, they don't have free will. But this philosophy came out. And so in 1989, when Tim Berners-Lee came up with the idea of the World Wide Web, it's all about unfettered sharing of information. And really, it sounds wonderful. Wow, let's share information, freely available, wow. And some of you may remember the early 90s. The beginning was enthusiasm. Wow, everything, all the information is available. And then you can't find anything. There's too much stuff. You can't find anything. We're drowning in information. So early on, people decided we have to do something to find information. So the first solution was, well, how do we organize a library? We have a catalog. Let's build a catalog for the internet. So a company was formed around this idea, a catalog for the internet. Well, of course, we discover after a while it doesn't scale. I mean, it's okay after a while, it doesn't scale. A new idea came, search engines. And people start different search engines, and I see here some people have enough gray hair to remember Alta Vista, for example. And it didn't work so well. You can remember, you scroll page after page after page to find something useful, and then Sergey Brin and Larry Page come up with an amazing idea. And when the first it came out, and you put it, and the first or second link is the right link. It was absolutely amazing. Now remember, information wants to be free, and they want to have a business. So they have to monetize it. How do they monetize eyeballs, right? This is a big expression in Silicon Valley. How do you monetize eyeballs? And then an answer which they took, it was a brilliant answer. They took it from media, television, broadcast television is kind of free. Newspapers are not free, but they're incredibly cheap. Advertising. Let's use advertising. Very quickly, people discovered that online advertising is incredibly ineffective. You see stuff not relevant to you. And you don't somehow. I don't quite understand why it's effective. It catches more your attention on paper because people take real estate of the page. If you do it on the screen, people get really annoyed. You have to click. How do you make people click? A new brilliant idea: micro-targeted advertising. We have to target advertisement personally to you. But that means we don't need to know something about you. And that's how they started harvesting data. And the amount of how much data they harvest, the answer is, we don't know. You think they follow everything you do on the web. Turns out it's much more than that. For example, we found out that Google has a partnership with MasterCard. If you use the MasterCard offline, they want to know that because they want to correlate what you do offline with what you do online. And what came out of that is the new phrase that's been coined by Shoshana Zuboff. I think she's from Harvard. The age of, she called it surveillance capitalism. And the book came out just last year. And you all have heard of the phrase, if you're not paying for it, you are the product. And this is how, here is a one sentence trying to describe what's going on here. The combination of state surveillance, which also is going on, and its capitalist counterpart, means that digital technology is separating the citizens in all society into two groups. The watchers, invisible, unknown, unaccountable, and the watched. And that's most of us. Now, how well has it been working for Google? Very well, thank you very much. Okay, revenue from advertising is by now over $100 billion. Because Google have tried all kinds of things to diversify, but its main source of income so far is advertising, and it's been stupendously successful. So now let's do a simple Gedanken experiment. This Institute of Ethics that Facebook is funding in Munich, let's send Sergey Brin and Larry Page for a 1-week crash course, ethics bootcamp. Do we expect them to go back to Silicon Valley and have a town hall meeting and to say, guys, we have an enlightenment, we reach enlightenment, surveillance capitalism is no good, we must stop doing it? It's not going to happen. Now, I don't think the response should that we should say, oh, Larry Page and Sergey Brin are unethical. Here's what I wrote. I'm quoting myself. Allow me to do that. I wrote in beginning of the year, if society finds the surveillance business model offensive, then the remedy is public policy in the form of laws and regulation rather than ethics outrage. If we don't want Google to do that, it's up to us as a society to say, no, that's not acceptable. We can tell them, you bad, because they are running a business, and businesses want to make profits, and that's the way they have found a way to make profit. Now, you can decide whether or not you want to be friends with them. But we can, as a society, complain about the ethical aspects of it. So let me go back, dig deeper, but ethics versus public policy, and this has implication very specific to this event here. So is ethics important? Of course it is important. And I think I agree with people that said that all CS students need to be exposed to ethics, and I'm very happy to report that last spring we introduced here a new course that I co-taught with Tina Peterson on computing ethics and society, and I'm very pleased that it was a communication extensive course or intensive course. We capped it at 40 students, and the students were knocking at our door. We want in. And when we took it to the faculty, they said, you must figure out how to scale it to all CS students, which is, if you heard the numbers, this is a daunting challenge now to make sure that every CS student get exposed to ethics. And I think there are some students here who have taken the course, and I think it was a very useful experience for them. Ethics has to inform public policy. And Justice Earl Warren put it beautifully. He said, in civilized life, the law floats in a sea of ethics. When we decide what to make law, we are thinking in terms of we take the lens of ethics. As a society, we struggle balancing law and ethics. Think of prohibition. We think that drinking was bad. So we said, let's make it to a law. The result was a disaster. We had to undo it. And we said, now how much you drink is left to you as a personal choice. Same issue with the drug war. We are struggling with the drug war. We understand the drugs are bad for you, but should we make it a law? It's a struggle. The important thing to understand, ethics is about individual decision making. And ethics is not self-executing. There are a few exceptions in the law and medicine that you can lose your license because of ethical violations. I could lose, in principle, I can be fired for rice for ethical violation, but these are ethical issues that are actually codified in rice law. We went from ethics, for example, rice passed a policy some years ago about amorous relations between faculty and student. We took ethics and we made it effectively law, because the law is executing, it's institutionalized. Ethics is not institutionalized. Some students had some issue with one of the companies that was represented here. And they wrote a petition. And they thought that we as a department should decide to boycott that company. And we said, no, you can make a personal choice, and we are happy that you are making personal choices, but it's not up to us as a department to make a blacklist of companies. And you may not like one company. I have a fairly long companies I don't like. And the answer is not, we are going to boycott all of them because we don't like them. That's not the way to do this. So what's going to happen? I put it intentionally, some of the quotes from, all of them are almost from a year ago. Because this was, I would say, pre-regulation kind of quote. These are quotes from Financial Times, The Guardian, the quotes, Washington Post. All the first 4 quotes are the media saying, gee, we need to do something about it. We need to start regulating it. The final one is Tim Cook saying we need to start regulating data. Of course, it's easier for Tim Cook to say it because he has a business model. It doesn't depend on data. But I will take what I have. And now I think the train is kind of have left the station. You hear, I think Microsoft has come out publicly in form of some form of regulation. And now we're coming to the hard topic. I mean, if you have children, then you all face this dilemma, how much to regulate children? What kind of rules do you put in place? On one hand, you want them to be safe. You like them to grow up and stay alive. But if you put too many rules, then they don't become independent, they don't develop. So we all struggle with this, and the same issue with this regulation. I want to finish by, of course, the industry is about making money, but there was an original vision of computing, which is more than just about making money. And I want to quote some of our patron saints, so to speak, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who developed binary notation. So some people call him the father of the bit. And he wrote about, he envisioned computers, amazing. This is, we're talking about the 17th century. And he envisioned what they call reasoning calculus. And he said, mankind will then possess a new instrument that will enhance the capabilities of the mind to a far greater extent than optical instruments strengthen the eyes. So this to me is the ultimate lens about all the tools we're building. Does it enhance the capabilities of the mind? And I would say some tools do that. Social media, I'm not so sure. And Ada Lovelace, about 150 years later, she's in correspondence with Charles Babbage, and Babbage wanted to start a company and make money. And she writes to Babbage and she says, yeah, I'm okay with you making money, but I wish to aid my might toward expounding and interpreting the Almighty, His laws and His works for the most effective use of mankind. Ultimately, this has to be for social good, and people now hear a lot the phrase social good. And I want to close by telling you about an initiative we started at RISE earlier this year. We call it Technology, Culture, and Society. And the observation is that if you look now, what is some of the most fundamental force changing society, driving society, is technological change. And the answer is that society will love the benefits of technology, but we seem to be ill-equipped to deal with the adverse impact of technology. For example, in our own field, think of what we know now, we call it the social bubbles and the polarized society, and we can see the political consequence of that. If you have children, if you have teenage children, I'm sure you have read that teen suicide is up, in particular teenage girl suicide is up, and the only explanation that people have is the ubiquity of social media on smartphones that are in everybody's pockets. We did an experiment in the course. During spring recess, next middle of the spring there is a 2-day recess. We asked the students to go through 24-hour device abstinence. 24 hours, no device, and at the end they had to write an essay. What was it like? And I'm in the previous generation, and I expected to get essay that would say, wow, wonderful 24 hours, relaxing, I read books, I socialized. How naive and uninformed I was. This was completely 180%. The essays were, I was isolated, I was depressed, I couldn't contact anyone, I cannot drive anywhere because I don't know how to get anywhere without a device. I can't reach to any of my friends because everybody's just talking on everybody is using their device. And in fact, if you read the symptoms of they are describing and you open Wikipedia, withdrawal symptoms, you just see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was just classical withdrawal symptom. It was just uncanny. I mean, for me, it was such a rude awakening. Think of totally outside of our field, climate change. We had here last week, there was a lecture, and 3 speakers, I was one of them, about the apocalypse. And one speaker spoke about what's happening already now to the what is it called, the fauna around Earth. You know, we had an insect apocalypse. Insects are dying, birds are dying, I mean, corals are dying. And we seem to be somehow powerless to do anything about it. So the goal of the initiative is to try to look at this, how can society live with technology? Understand what are the forces driving technological development, and understanding how do we respond and how do we use it. And we're going to do research, we're going to do education, we talk about outreach, we have conferences, lectures. If you're interested, please talk to me. Thank you very much.
We have time for a couple questions.
Hi, I'm Arda, 2008. So I sometimes worry when our academic community is a little bit naive. And I mean that not in a bad sense, but a lot of things had to happen over the years. And it seems that we are just reacting. Just now we're thinking, oh, Google had this partnership with MasterCard. I wonder whether you have any thoughts on how to encourage cynicism, right, and to foresee the future so that we can be more proactive rather than reactive, which is where we are now.
So the truth of the matter is we're not the only one who are reactive. This is, humanity has been reactive. That's kind of the story here. And if you think about it, we just heard about this week we had the Nobel Prizes, right, in medicine, physics, chemistry, literature. Why did Alfred Nobel establish the Nobel Prize? Because he held guilt feelings. He invented dynamite for civil engineering. And suddenly it turns out that this is a fantastic weapons of war. And he says, oh my God, he has guilt pangs. The chemists were shocked in World War I, where their chemistry was suddenly the basis for chemical weapons. The physicists had a moment of awakening in World War II with the nuclear weapons. Okay? So somehow society always experiments. I mean, there are very, very few technologies where we say, you know what, let's not do that. The only thing I can really think, and I will be happy to learn of more examples, is cloning. We have somehow decided human cloning is so freaky that so far as I know, we have not done it. But again, somebody somewhere will do it. I'm worried at some point, okay? So I think there is now a debate trying to figure out what should we do, how can we foresee it. There was a proposal by an ACM group that every research proposal should have a page in which they speculate a priori about adverse impacts, okay? The problem with that is that very often, you know, our technology is so sophisticated, everybody works on a little piece of it. And what happens is ultimately you put all these pieces together, you get something. Think of, to make cloud computing, think how many different pieces in programming languages, in telecommunication, in compiler, in system design, in storage design, go into making the cloud the way it works today. So someone who will just talk to you about virtualizing a communication in a data center, you ask this person to think about adverse impact, it's going to be very difficult. You say, I can't think of any adverse impact. Only when you put this whole thing together, suddenly you realize, oh my goodness, this is what happened. And so I think it's a huge challenge. I mean, we are struggling with it. Of course, all of us would like to see in advance this impact, but this is all about unintended consequences very often. There was a question here? Yeah, Jen.
Attending PhD graduate 2000, faculty member at the University of Rochester. This is a topic I care very much about, and a lot of people in Rochester too. I remember John McCarthy, famous computer scientist. He's famous talking about solving ASIC problems using technology. An example that I won't mention here. So if we are solving really the technology problem using public policy, my question is how to actually go to do this. Computer science people are not policy experts. We know computer systems, not judicial systems. And on the other side, policy people don't know computer science.
Well, that's why we are forming such an initiative. We actually sit together with social scientists. So this attitude, I have to say, I knew John McCarthy, and he was really a great man, but this is a very typical techno-optimist approach. If we have a problem with technology, what is the solution? More technology. This is a typical approach, okay? And so I'm a bit skeptic of that. And the answer is that we need to bring people together. In fact, what we're trying to bring at RISE together are technologists who understand the technology. And of course, we have to make an effort to explain, abstract, and explain it to non-technologists. And we bring social scientists and humanists, okay? Because it turns out that some of these questions, I mean, for example, everybody's now facing the question, we are automating more and more and more. What's going to happen to all these people without jobs? And as you know, there is in Silicon Valley, it's Coca-Cola talk about universal basic income. Okay? We'll just give everybody money so they'll stop complaining. And the question is life without work? What's the value of life without work? Is work just means to make a living? Or is there more to it? Turns out that these are old questions. These questions, some of them you have to go back to Socrates to look at some of these questions. Humanity have been struggling for a long time with what is a good life? And actually, the answer from the Greek philosopher, a good life is in which you are being useful to society. Society at large, society at the small, your family, people who feel useless, even if you have solved their socioeconomic needs, they don't feel they have good life. We are social beings. So we need to communicate across the campus on these issues.
I believe Wen was next.
Hi, I'm Wen.
You have to speak up, you're far.
I'm 13. And I actually work in this field. Let's just say interpreting problems. And I really wish your class was offered when I was here.
I wish that too. I would have loved to have you as a student.
Yeah, well, actually, yeah, definitely love that. And related to the last question, actually, I was wondering, so we are starting seeing tech advisors, for congressmen, and actually significantly in Congress hearings versus senator hearings, they're asked whatever questions. I guess my question is, I know Rice is making a great initiative, a great effort. Are there ways, what are the ways we can follow along?
Come talk to me later.
All right.
Anybody who wants to be involved, come talk to me. Or send me email, you can find me. Maybe we
We have time for two more, Gurov and then
Okay.
Julia.
Mine was the same question as well.
Oh, okay,
So
okay. All right, go ahead.
Speak up.
Gaurav Manga, PhD 99. My question, Moshe, is have you considered doing offering a crash course for legislators and policymakers on computing and ethics, because, yes, it can bring people together, but one of the things, cybersecurity is also complex, as you know, and one of the things that we found very useful is providing a crash course to audit committee members and CFOs and CEOs and board members on, what exactly this problem is from a business risk standpoint. So I would love to see rise of.
I think it's a great idea. Let's follow up. We should do that. No, we have done it in other areas. We have had boot camp in high performance computing. We have boot camp in data science. Other places are doing boot camp in cybersecurity. I mean, the interesting how you do it is, this is not a course where we tell people this is right, this is wrong. I mean, you kind of know what's right and wrong. I mean, it's partly is about following up or looking at unintended consequences, and they're complicated. It's really, you kind of do it the way you do, for example, the way they teach law school and business school, mostly by case studies. But I think that the idea of doing a boot camp in this area, I think it's a very nice idea, and definitely I'll follow up on it.
And
Last question.
For our last question, we'll take Wasim.
Hi, I'm Wasim, class of 2014. I'm really glad that there's a lot of conversation about policy making related to this now. And as you mentioned, the training and standardization. My impression is that a lot of times, like legal policies and just public policy making tends to have this like pendulum swing-like effect.
Absolutely.
And, so, do you have any thoughts on how we can avoid running into another prohibition era or like drug on wars type of situation where we just end up stifling or over-regulating and swinging in the other direction?
So Max Tegmark is a physicist at MIT, and he has been concerned about, there's a lot of focus on the AI. People think like it's just about AI. I think it's a bit broader than just AI, And in fact, they've started something. There's some people who see AI now as a future risk, is a risk factor to the future of humanity. But I heard him give a talk, and he put it very nicely. He said the answer is not less technology, because we have never been successful in somehow stopping technology. He said we need more societal wisdom of studying technology. So we need to start, we need to understand it better, this relation between society and technology and how do we interact it. And I don't think we are good at it. I mean, we really need to start studying. I went about a month ago to a conference with totally new experience for me. It was the annual meeting of 4S. What is 4S? Society for the Social Study of Science. And I thought, look, I mean, let's be honest. We tend to look at the micro, this technology, this gadget, this thing. I thought this would be a place where people look at the big picture. I was wrong. They look at this scientist and that scientist, but they were not looking at the big picture either. And we need to start having at the big picture this analysis of society. And this is what we are aiming to do, to try to understand better this interaction between society and technology. And so we will start to understand what is the phenomenon, how do we do it, and we need this scholarship and understanding to inform our policymakers and our legislatures. And right now we don't have it. So, for example, I'll give you a huge problem. How do we regulate speech on social media? So, right now, as you know, the platforms are controlled by Section 230. Anybody knows what is Section 230? Guys, this is very, very important. All of you should go tonight and Google Section 230. This is 26 words in the Telecommunication Act of 1996 that says that platform owners are not responsible for the content placed on them by third parties. So, if you publish an op-ed in the New York Times saying that Vardi is a terrible professor, I can sue you and the New York Times for defamation. But if you do it on social media, Facebook would say, well, we are not responsible. I can sue you, but I cannot sue Facebook. So this enables you, all this proliferation on social media was enabled by Section 230. Turns out that this position, while legally that's what protects them, politically it's become untenable, unsustainable, because it's not just you defaming me, it's it's the KKK and the Nazis and ISIS and everybody can put content on Facebook, and they realize they cannot do that. So they're starting to deal with it. So we can say, you know what, let's take away Section 230. Let's make Facebook a publisher. Do we want one company to regulate the speech of 2.7 billion people? This is equally scary thought, right? No regulation. So what do we do here? So the answer is, we're really struggling for ideas. We realize that this unfettered speech is actually problematic, but how to balance it is a struggle. So thank you very much. We have a
Thank you,
break.
Moshe.
We have a break.